a man named George Tyler who put a lot of money into Garvey's hand. He was a former investor. One day, he came to see Garvey at one of the UNIA offices. George Tyler stepped in and started shooting. So as he's in there bussing, Amy Ashwood, who was only Garvey's girlfriend at the time before he married her, jumped in front of the shooter to protect Garvey and tackled him down a flight of stairs. Garvey was hit 3 times. The next day, Garvey still went to his lecture and spoke in Philadelphia, all bandaged up and everything. The UNIA was growing at an alarming rate, and the Back to Africa movement was huge. Garvey was big time. There were over 500 chapters of the UNIA. And now here comes J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover sent all types of agents to infiltrate the UNIA.
Hoover's agents were in the audience at Carnegie Hall when Garvey bragged that the UNIA would soon be strong enough to exact its own form of justice.
When those crackers lynch a Negro below the Mason-Dixon line, since it is not safe to lynch a white man in any part of America, we shall press the button and lynch him in Africa.
The agent reported that Garvey's address was met with great applause and much excitement.
Garvey felt like black folks needed their own ships. There was the White Star Line, the Irish had the Green Star Line, so Garvey created the Black Star Line. Not only just to help with transportation, but to also sell goods. The SS Yarmouth was the first ship purchased, and Garvey renamed the ship the Frederick Douglass.
Welcome to another episode of I Am the Revolution. I am your host today. My name is Jay. You can find me on Instagram. On Instagram or Twitter at Compton Made Me on Twitter and Revolutionary Compton J on Instagram. Today we have Marcus Garvey, is the black iconic radical that we'll be talking about today for this latest episode of I Am the Revolution. Welcome all revolutionary people here for this education, and that's what this series is about. And I'll read what it says there scrolling at the bottom. I Am the Revolution. This series is focused on revolutionary history and revolutionary preparation through education. So that is the purpose of these series. And you can find this series and all of the other episodes if you go to our page, go to video, and they just list the different playlists from start to bottom. I think it's like the third one from the top. So you'll see there. All right, so I'll toss up some comments, but we're going to jump right into it. This is a little bit different episode, so it's slightly different the way we're going to run it. Quickly, if you're here, hit that like button. We're at 50 some odd people. Hit that like button. More people can see this and get in here for this education. What's up, man? About 45 minutes. Just started like 5 minutes ago. All right, so wife and girls just got back home. But anyway, hit that like button. We can bring some more people in here for this education on Marcus Garvey. I'm also, just so you know, I'm also sitting on the episode for Muhammad Ali. It's another episode that's waiting. There's 2 episodes waiting in the wait for I Am the Revolution. Muhammad Ali and Ernesto Che, the revolutionary. Those 2 are already ready to go, just waiting for a time I can insert it in. And today, luckily, First mod. Oh, okay. Yes. Luckily, I had some time to squeeze something in, maybe not a regular episode. And that's why I said maybe this will be a good time for an I Am Revolution episode. So we're going to get into it after I toss up a couple of comments here. What's up, everybody? Revolutionaries assemble. Yes. I love Black Star, Brown Skin Girl. That was the music back there. That beat is so infectious to that clip. Every time I play it, just words in my head start bouncing around. But yeah, Muhammad Ali. I don't know if it'll be next. I don't know the order. It's just because literally I do my streams off of feel. I have to feel the episode, and I was feeling this episode today when I was watching. How did my sweater go? Okay. So girls are back, like I said. My middle daughter has to wear one of my sweaters, so to the mall. But anyway, enough with the daddy stuff, enough with the comments, and last request for you to hit the like button. As soon as you arrive, hit that like button. Remind people in the comments as they come in, and subscribe to the Substack if you would like to get notifications when we do streams like this for I Am the Revolution, or when we have summits, or any of our other like daily news sort of streams that we do more often. Join our Substack. You get notifications that way. You also get the added perk of Discord. We send Discord links maybe every other week to the subscriber list on Substack, and also on Patreon. So whether you're a Patreon member that's scrolling at the bottom, or a subscriber on Substack, you get access to the Discord. All right, so let's get back into the focus of today's episode. And the Black radical that's spotlighted today is Marcus Garvey. Now, a lot of people may not know of all Black sort of liberation historical figures. And I should put recuperation is actually going to be some of that in here, but I didn't even mean to put that up there. I'll put his middle initial. So Marcus Garvey is one of those Black radicals a lot of American population, or United States population, don't know too much about, or know the least about of all the people. And it's weird because this is the person we should know the most about. Just a lot of things came from Marcus Garvey and the things he did. And he, like, for example, woke, you know how woke is a big thing? Marcus Garvey, the term woke comes from Marcus Garvey. It goes back that far. So don't believe what Joe Rogan said on a podcast about woke, and he had somebody bring up a news clipping. I think it was from the 50s. Actually, it precedes that. And the person who was writing that article was just a white person observing Black people, and that's what they got out of it. That's not to be taken as a historical account of what woke is or where it came from. It actually came from Marcus Garvey. He was a person who knew how to print. So printing like back then when they used to print paper or newspaper on a printing press. So he knew how to do that, and when he got his hands on stuff, he would print things for himself. And on one of those things, on one of those graphics, I guess I can call it a graphic, the term "stay awake," and I covered this in a stream called. It's a stream with woke. It's our woke stream that we did to define how America co-opted woke or something like that. But go check that out. I'm already on a tangent, and let's get back to the topic here. Marcus Garvey. So we're gonna play. There's a pretty decent. I mean, it's missing some stuff, but there's a decent enough documentary we're gonna be covering, along with some other videos and speeches of his. So The documentary, which will be probably the bulk of the videos that we're going to play, we'll play like the first 30 minutes. This is why this is probably going to take three episodes. That's why I think this is labeled the early years, because this is a long documentary, and it's detailed. So that's the reason why I chose it, even though it does miss some things. So let's bring. Oh, actually, let me play this again, and we can talk about it. So let's play the intro video again, and Marcus Garvey is the subject for the episode of this episode of I Am Revolution. I Am the Revolution. Make sure I say the Revolution, because there's another podcast called I Am Revolution. But this brand new episode of I Am the Revolution will focus on Marcus Garvey. Let's get into it with the first. Let's see. Let's start with this one. With the first part of the documentary. The documentary is about. Actually, let me just share it from here. Stop here. Probably be the easier way and share the new one. Got to get a new mouse. It's not working right. But anyway, here is that documentary.
Take part in one of the biggest parades in New York's history.
As a young boy, to see my father in the parade was one of the greatest things in the world. I would be right there to see him put on his tunic, and I loved to see that sword that he carried. It really made me feel very proud of it.
Mills was one of 100,000 black people marching under the red, black, and green flag of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. The world had never seen anything like it. It was all the work of one man, Marcus Garvey.
Every window that you looked at, people's heads were out to see the Marcus Garvey parade. Most of them wanted to see Marcus Garvey. And he was very well decorated, his hats and the feathers, but he drove always in his automobile, sitting back.
At the age of 34, Garvey claimed millions of followers worldwide. His controversial goal, to create an independent black nation, made him one of the most powerful people in America and one of the most hated. The federal government targeted him as a threat to national security.
So as the documentary used the phrase controversial goal, that kind of tips you off that this is not the most radical documentary about Marcus Garvey, and there's probably some more out there that's just probably not on YouTube or accessible online. But this is pretty decent, but just understand there are some slip-ups like that throughout the documentary.
Rival black leaders denounced him as a lunatic and a traitor to the race. But Garvey may have been his own worst enemy.
He wasn't one to take advice from others kindly. He made his own decisions, and he would rise or fall by the decisions that he made, because he was a supreme egotist.
Volatile and secretive, yet charismatic and visionary, Marcus Garvey changed forever the way black Americans looked at themselves and the world.
He started something that became bigger than Garvey himself. He, more than any other figure in the 20s.
Yeah, he's like known as not the father of black nationalism, but like the father of black pride, I guess you can say, like self-worth, black is beautiful sort of thing. He is the father of that. That's my wife, if you heard her. Hi.
Hi, honey.
Yeah, so everybody's home. So it may be some in and out that you're going to hear. Hey, sweetheart, how are you? There was the other one, the little one.
20th century, symbolizes the turning of the perception of black people into something positive. Garvey's father was a mason, a professional mason. And among the things that he did was to create tombs for people in the St. Anne's Bay graveyard. He took Garvey with him to the graveyard one day, and they were digging this grave, and his father had Garvey go down inside the grave, but then he pulled the ladder up and left the child in the bottom of the grave. Garvey said that he cried out and his father wouldn't let him get back up out of the grave. He wanted to teach him a lesson.
Alone in the grave, young Marcus Garvey learned that he could rely on no one but himself. It was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. Marcus Garvey was born in August of 1887 in St. Anne's Bay, a small town on the northern coast of Jamaica. His father, who had been born a slave, withdrew from the family for days at a time and insisted his wife and 2 children address him at all times as Mr. Garvey.
My grandfather was a very stubborn man who had to have his way, who he was quite retiring to. He used to, the strange thing about him, he used to have his own little apartment off the main house where they lived. And he would be by himself there, reading a lot. Now, if you look at it, the thing, Marcus Garvey was like that himself too. He liked to be by himself.
Marcus obviously inherited many of his characteristics.
Yeah, because throughout this documentary, and if you read about him, this comes up that he was pretty stubborn about his beliefs. So he believed hey, this is it, and he didn't like dissenters in that. So that was one thing about Marcus Garvey that comes up, and a lot of people believe. I mean, his family members actually. I mean, I guess reading about him now, I would say that's probably likely it. It comes from maybe his father's upbringing and just how his father was. Maybe that could be one way to look at it.
His father was repressed in many ways, a frustrated person, a person who could find no way out and seemed to have internalized much of the feeling that the world was against him.
Garvey's mother raised crops and, like many women of her time, cooked for a white family to support her own. But Sarah Jane Richards wanted more for her only surviving son than a life of common labor in the banana fields.
Garvey's mother had tremendous influence upon him, and she had great hopes for him. She wanted, in fact, to call him Moses, and she thought that he was going to do great things. That source of love, that someone, his mother in particular, loved him, helped to create that extraordinary self-confidence that Garvey had.
As a boy, Garvey imagined himself delivering speeches to adoring crowds. He spent hours reading, and even that his friends, they couldn't pick a single word from the dictionary that he didn't know.
The young Garvey had ambition. He wanted to get out of St. Anne's Bay. Later he said he dreamt of becoming the first gentleman in the world. And it seemed as if he early on developed this interest in a kind of dramatic, epic story of himself in which he would play a leading part.
But Garvey's grand ambitions were tempered by reality. As children, blacks and whites mixed easily in his community. One of his closest friends was a white neighbor, Joyce Reary. But as they became teenagers, her father put an end to the friendship.
At the age of 14, she was sent away to England and told never to speak to him because he was a nigger. And he said that's the first time that he heard and became aware of this idea of being black and what it meant. He felt shut out. He felt that he was excluded and made to feel that he was not good enough. And the rest of his life was really an attempt to prove that he was just as good as anyone else in the world.
Under the colonial education system, Garvey was forced to leave school at the age of 14. He became a printer's apprentice and quickly earned the status of master printer. In the print shop,
So I spoke about this earlier, how this apprenticeship where he learned this and how it's connected to tracing the lineage of where the term woke comes from. And it comes from one of his printings that he made itself. And it was, to distribute to Black communities, saying things like, stay awake to what's going on, or stay woke, stuff like that was in these publications, if you want to loosely call it that. So let's continue.
He learned the power of controlling the written word and would soon publish his first newspaper, Garvey's Watchman.
So one thing to note about Marcus is that, or Mr. Garvey, as from an early age, he was already radical from an early age, where for me, example, it took, till I'm well into my adulthood. And then for others, right around, high school. But for him, it was at a very, very young age. And I just wonder what types of things inspired him to be so radical in the beginning. Maybe it was his dad, or maybe it was his mom, or both.
In 1910, 23-year-old Marcus Garvey set out on a journey through Central America. Supporting himself as a journalist and laborer, Garvey saw black workers harvesting plantations, loading ships, and building the Panama Canal. They were the power behind the economy. But in their isolation from each other, black people were powerless. In 1914, he came upon the book that would change his life.
Marcus Garvey's reading of Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery was an eye-opener to him and pointed the way to his conclusion, which remained with him throughout his life, that the situation facing black people was a global.
So if you didn't catch that, Booker T. Washington was an influence, at least his book was an influence and sort of what propelled him. And I'll kind of rewind it just slightly here so we can see.
Washington's Up From Slavery.
Up From Slavery, if you want to look that book up.
Was an eye-opener to him and pointed the way to his conclusion, which remained with him throughout his life, that the situation facing black people was a global one.
I was determined that the black man would not continue to be kicked about as I had seen in Central America and as I had read of it in America. Where is the black man's government? Where is his king and his kingdom? Where is his president, his country, his men of big affairs? I could not find them. And then I declared, I will help to make them. My brain was afire.
As he sailed for home, Garvey's grand vision for himself and for the world clicked into place. He would unify black people scattered across the globe, and he would be their leader. Back in Kingston, he attended a debate and noticed an attractive 17-year-old named Amy Ashwood. When Ashwood took to the stage and delivered a powerful political speech, Garvey knew he had found a kindred spirit. He approached her later that evening as they rode home on a trolley. At last I have met the star of my destiny, Garvey exclaimed.
Her parents were very opposed to it, particularly her mother, who was trying to keep her away from Garvey because Garvey didn't seem to have a solid income or be the type of person that she wanted her daughter dating. But Garvey was a great romantic, and he announced to Ashwood that she was his Josephine.
And she says, if you are my Napoleon, and they make a pledge that they would remain together and forge what would become the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and they launch it together in August of 1914.
With the motto, one God, one aim, one destiny, the Universal Negro Improvement Association stressed race pride and sought backers for an industrial training school, modeled on Booker T. Washington's Tuskegee Institute. Garvey and Ashwood attracted a small, loyal following, but there was trouble from the beginning. Garvey created enemies by attacking established leaders. He wouldn't tolerate the slightest dissent from UNIA members, and he was a disastrous money manager, using contributions to the school to pay for his own living expenses. When his few supporters clamored for an accounting, 29-year-old Garvey decided to leave town. He hired himself out on the crew of the SS Talek, and in the spring of 1916, he left Amy Ashwood behind and set sail alone for New York City. His ideas had failed in Jamaica, but they would find new life in America.
Harlem is a throbbing, bubbling, exciting place. These are fantastic buildings, apartments. The street life is abundant. This is a fast-moving and a very affluent world, and it's a whole new world.
Garvey quickly found lodging with a Jamaican family in Harlem and got a job as a printer.
He was not a wealthy person, far from it. Living in a sort of a hall, little hall bedroom was the kind of bedroom that was very popular in Harlem in those days. So he was in pretty poor financial shape. But the idea that he had, this great desire to build a great movement, sort of sustained him.
A. Philip Randolph, editor of the influential Messenger magazine, heard about the young agitator from Jamaica and arranged for Garvey to deliver his first formal lecture in the United States. Garvey printed his own handbills, referring to himself as the Honorable Marcus Garvey.
So if you ever look up Marcus Garvey, you'll see a lot of content that comes back with that name, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, and turns out he coined it for himself. And like I said, he knew how to print his own thing. So you have to understand this was a sort of a big thing, being able to print stuff your own self. Now we think of it now like anybody can just print up stuff, write something on the flyer and print. This was sort of something that you could, an ability that to be able to print, mass print something, was an ability that was very valuable at the time, to get a message out.
He painstakingly rehearsed his speech, just as he had as a boy. But when Garvey rose to address the audience, his confidence shattered. He spoke with a tremor and shook like a leaf.
It seems that Garvey was anxious, he was nervous, he was heckled. He, at one point in his address, lost his balance and fell off the stage, fell into the audience. He literally fell on his face. What he had hoped would be a great sort of coming out turned into this humiliation.
Crushed by the failure of his American debut, Garvey wandered into the Tabernacle Church of Reverend Billy Sunday, a white evangelist who attracted massive crowds to revival meetings.
Billy Sunday was the granddaddy, the man who really created the 20th century revival figure, revivalist preacher figure in the United States. Garvey quickly takes on Billy Sunday's speaking style. Very athletic, very intense, moving a lot, and Garvey would refashion his oratory in keeping with the model of Billy Sunday.
With renewed confidence in his power to move an audience, Garvey set out for a year-long tour of 38 states. His mission was still to raise money for a vocational school in Jamaica. But along the way, Garvey got a first-hand look at the contradiction of race in America, the stunning potential of the most affluent black population in the world, alongside the degradation of Jim Crow and the horrors of lynching.
So let me pause it here, because in these two dynamic, in these two examples, where you have black bourgeoisie. Oops, did I go too far back? Here, I mean, it's the same thing we still have now, where you see the same side of the African American or black coin. You have one side that's poor, one side that's rich, and the rich side is not doing anything. It's almost like they want to have the distinction of being the good Negroes. But yeah, happening too. So let's listen.
Affluent black population in the world, alongside the degradation of Jim Crow and the horrors of lynching.
When we'd walk along the plank walks, they didn't have sidewalks here in New Orleans at that time, but you'd walk along the plank walks. But if a white person came along, no matter who it was, a white child, a white man, a white woman, if they came along, you had to get off the plank walk and stand in the mud until they passed.
You was oppressed and depressed and disgusted that you were born in the wrong race of people because of your color. Whatever was left, that's what you got. I wonder what was left. And we were at the lowest ebb at that time. The black people was.
On July 2nd, 1917, just months after America's entry into World War I, the city of East St. Louis exploded in the worst racial rioting the country had ever seen. 39 whites and hundreds of African Americans were killed.
You have black troops
Thinking about doing a separate I Am the Revolution on this incident in history that they're talking about right here. Not for sure, but I'm looking through information to see if I'm able to do one. So
going off to fight to make the world safe for democracy in April, and in July you have black people being murdered in the most wanton and barbaric manner in East St. Louis. You know, children being thrown back into flaming houses, people being boarded up in their houses before they're torched. So even by American standards, East St. Louis was a horror.
W.E.B. Du Bois, leader of the NAACP and supporter of integration, led a silent march in response to the massacre. But to Garvey, this was no time for silence. It was time for black people to get together and fight back. He spoke out at an emergency meeting in Harlem.
The whole thing, my friends, is a bloody farce. That the police and soldiers did nothing to stem the murder thirst of the mob is conclusive proof of conspiracy on the part of the civil authorities to condone the acts of the white mob against Negroes. White people are taking advantage of black men today because black men all over the world are disunited.
It is that speech that marks the turning point of Garvey away from Jamaica, away from a preoccupation with matters related to the West Indies. And now he's not looking for support for what he is hoping to accomplish in the West Indies, but rather he is now sucked into the vortex of American race relations.
Garvey is deeply suspicious of the efforts of white liberals and of their black peers to bring about the integration of blacks in the United States. He, as a matter of fact, doesn't believe that it's possible. He does not believe that white people can represent the best interest of black people.
Garvey opened the first American division of the UNIA in September of 1917. Just as he had in Jamaica, Garvey distinguished himself by calling established black leaders weak and self-serving.
Even though I had a great deal of admiration for W.B. Du Bois and A. Philip Randolph and other black leaders of the time, I thought that their approach to our problems was too doggone tame, and that we needed to have that attitude of Marcus Garvey, that stand up on your feet and be ready to defend your manhood at all times.
And all of a sudden, this golden voice from the Caribbean came and stood on the corners in Harlem and began to talk about self-esteem, holding up your backbone, you know, no wishbones. And Mr. Garvey gave them hope that there was a dream for black people.
Garvey told black Americans that their history did not begin with slavery.
I'm going to pause it here and come back to the rest of this here. But I'm going to go to a different video and bring up his son here just for, I think it's a 3-minute section here in this clip. Talked about his organization and how they opened the first one in the United States. They were just talking about that in the video. So I wanted to show this part and how the FBI in the United States tried to did eventually do, but in many ways tried to criminalize him. through this organization. So he talks about that along with a couple of other things. So let's listen. This is his son, Dr. Julius Garvey. This is Marcus Garvey's son on Democracy Now!
Before we go into all of that, for people, especially young people, who have not heard of your father, talk about the context in which all of that took place. Talk about who Marcus Garvey was.
Yeah, it was a very important time because this was early 20th century. My father formed the organization Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League in 1914 in Jamaica, West Indies, came to the United States in 1916. And of course, this was 1914-18 war, the First World War, the so-called Great War. And there was a large movement of African Americans from the agricultural South coming to the North because there were jobs that were available now in terms of the industrialization process to back up the war machinery. And many young, quotes, white men had gone to war. So there were many jobs up north. So there was this migration. So we had, you might say, a Southern African Americans who had been subjected to, you might say, the lack of Reconstruction, where they were subjected to the black codes and Jim Crow laws and so on, coming up north, being able to be employed in the industrial process. And then, in a sense, asking themselves now, well, what is freedom? How do I manage my future? You know, I've been sharecropping. I've been subjected to Southern injustice. Here I am in the North. I mean, what is my dimension of freedom? You know, what are my citizenship rights? What are my human rights as a person? And my father, in a sense, had the answer because he had been all over the world and he had seen the conditions of African people in the Caribbean, on the continent, and also now in the Americas. And his idea was really to unite African people around the world because it was a process that had subjugated them. Now, this was 400 years of slavery and you know, 50 or so years of colonialism. Colonialism, you know, started in 1885 with the Berlin Conference, where now Africa was simply invaded and dispensed to different European groups who just took over and, you know, reduced populations to peonage. And of course, post-slavery, you know, there was no assessment of the needs of African people who had been enslaved for such a long time. So there was no reparations for African people. The reparations was for the slave owners. So African people were destitute all around the world because of slavery, because of colonialism. And Marcus Garvey felt that, my dad felt that, you know, it was important to unite African people because with that unity, we would have some strength in terms of our resources, human and otherwise.
Well, let's turn to Marcus Garvey in his own words, speaking in 1921, shortly after returning from a long tour of the Caribbean and Central America.
I was going to play this separately, but they have it on here, so let's listen.
That the Universal Negro Improvement Association is an organization that seeks to unite into one solid body the 400 million Negroes of the world, to link up the 15 million Negroes of the United States of America with the 20 million Negroes of the West Indies, the 40 million Negroes of South and Central America, with the 280 million Negroes of Africa, for the purpose of bettering our industrial, commercial, educational, social, and political conditions. As you are aware, the world in which we live today is divided into separate race groups and distinct nationalities. Each race and each nationality is endeavoring to work out its own destiny to the exclusion of other races and other nationalities. We hear the cry of England for the Englishman, of France for the Frenchman, of Germany for the German, of Ireland for the Irish, of Palestine for the Jew, of Japan for the Japanese, of China for the Chinese. We of the Universal Negro Improvement Association are raising the cry of Africa for the Africans, those at home.
You notice in the speech, I don't know if you caught that, he said, and Palestine for the Jews. So he's naming how each ethnicity or race, maybe he referred to as a race at the time, has its own place. And he doesn't say that Israel for the Jews. He says Palestine for the Jews. So that's something I picked up on. don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but Jews live peacefully in Palestine alongside Palestinians before the Eastern Jews came down.
And those abroad, there are 400 million Africans in the world who have Negro blood coursing through their veins. And we believe that the time has come to unite these 400 million people for the one common purpose of bettering their conditions.
And let's go to more of Marcus Garvey from July 1921.
We want to unite the Negro race in this country. We want every Negro to work for one common object, that of building a nation of his own on the great continent of Africa. That all Negroes all over the world are working for the establishment of a government in Africa means that it will be realized in another few years. We want the moral and financial support of every Negro to make the dream a possibility. Already, this organization has established itself in Nigeria, West Africa, and is endeavoring to do all possible to develop that Negro country to become a great industrial and commercial commonwealth. Pioneers have been sent by this organization to Nigeria, and they are now laying the foundations upon which the 400 million Negroes of the world will build. If you believe that the Negro has a soul, if you believe that the Negro is a man, if you believe the Negro was endowed with the senses commonly given to other men by the Creator, then you must acknowledge that what other men have done, Negroes can do. We want to build up cities, nations, governments, industries of our own in Africa, so that we'll be able to have a chance to rise from the lowest to the highest positions in the African Commonwealth.
That was Marcus Garvey speaking in July 1921. So Julius Garvey, can you tell us what happened to him and what you're calling for now, and whether you think there's any prospect that Obama will grant a posthumous pardon?
Yes, well, basically, he was targeted by J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI as early as 1919. He called him a Negro agitator up in Harlem who was agitating for radical measures of uplifting African people. So he infiltrated my father's organization. The first FBI, black FBI agent was hired at that point in time to infiltrate the organization, and there were many others. Hoover and the Justice Department were looking for some means to criminalize Marcus Garvey so that he could be.
So the first black FBI agent was hired for this case, for Marcus Garvey. Do we celebrate every first black? And why? What other reason would the FBI hire a black person, the first black person that time? Because they're advanced, or is it because they want to infiltrate, get a black person to turn on his community?
He deported because he was an immigrant. He had filed his first papers, but they were keeping him from becoming a full citizen every time he left the country and so on. They wouldn't grant him visas to come back in, et cetera, et cetera. He had an attempt on his life by someone who came into the Liberty Hall, shot 3 shots at him. 2 sort of hit him, grazed him, 1 in his leg. That person ended up, quotes, committing suicide within 24 hours after.
Yeah, that person supposedly committed suicide in 24 hours after shooting him. And that intro video I play for you is about him being shot.
A man named George Tyler, who put a lot of money into Garvey's hand. He was a former investor. One day, he came to see Garvey at one of the UNIA offices. George Tyler stepped in and started shooting. So as he's in there bussing, Amy Ashwood, who was only Garvey's girlfriend at the time before he married her, jumped in front of the shooter to protect Garvey and tackled him down a flight of stairs. Garvey was hit 3 times. The next day, Garvey still went to his lecture and spoke in Philadelphia, all bandaged up and everything.
So I'll play it again later, but just wanted to insert that part so you could see how he was shot. And now back to his son, and then we'll get back to the
He was
documentary.
arrested in prison. So, he said he wasn't going to take the rap for himself. So there was a concerted effort, by whomever, but we do know also of J. Edgar Hoover. And they were trying everything. The Mann Act, of course, transporting a woman across the state line. The woman was my mother, his wife. Of course, she wasn't my mother yet at that point in time, but she was his wife. They were looking at him for tax evasion, and they were looking at him about the Black Star Line, which was his signature economic project to trade between Africa, the Caribbean, and the United States. So again, the whole idea was a political trial to destroy him and hence destroy the movement.
Have you heard from the White House?
No, we have not heard back anything from the White House.
Well, we're going to do part 2 of this fascinating discussion of your father, Marcus Garvey's life.
Of course not. Have we heard back from the White House? They're talking about Obama, so that's when he was on there. So this was 6 years ago. Yeah. All right. Now back to the original video. Almost finished here. We're gonna do about 32 minutes of the first. It'll be the first section, and then
to claim, he said, and people who had once done great things could do them again.
I'm gonna slightly back it up for those that may have forgotten the last let's say 45 seconds.
We needed to have that attitude of Marcus Garvey, that stand up on your feet and be ready to defend your manhood at all times.
And all of a sudden, this golden voice from the Caribbean came and stood on the corners in Harlem and began to talk about self-esteem, holding up your backbone, no wishbones. And Mr. Garvey gave them hope that there was a dream for Black people.
Garvey told Black Americans that their history did not begin with slavery. Africa's glorious past was also theirs to claim, he said, and people who had once done great things could do them again.
Garvey's message was revolutionary because at that time, it told Black people that they had to unite. They had to come together as one and believe in their roots, that they came from something greater than they were told. To begin with, Africa was called the Dark Continent. And the pictures that we got of Africa in those days were cannibals running around in the jungles, putting people in pots.
You see the representation in film of Black people or African people, African culture by white people. Maybe I should add by racist white people at that. So you're Black, you're born, you're 4 years old, you turn on the TV, you see something like this. You go to school, they tell you, oh, you're from a slave, you're nobody. You just pick cotton. Didn't get paid for that shit. And you don't deserve reparations, you weren't the actual one slave. That you can just shake that off, huh? People can just shake that type of indoctrination off.
Garvey changed all of that.
I am the equal of any white man. I want you to feel the same way. We have come now to the turning point of the Negro, where we have changed from the old cringing weakling and transformed into full-grown men demanding our portion as men.
He left the impression that the only way there could be a difference in the way Black people of African descent could be treated would be for them to have a powerful nation of their own.
Garvey toured the country again, this time initiating UNIA branches in big cities and small towns. Sunday meetings of the UNIA soon attracted thousands. Garvey meeting was a day-long family affair, half political rally and half religious revival.
The first time I went to a Garvey meeting was a Sunday afternoon in November of 1919. It was the first time I had heard the message of the UNIA.
The day I met Marcus Garvey was one of the most exciting days of my life. It was filled with anticipation from the earliest part of the day, because I knew that I was going with my father to meet Marcus Garvey.
And when Garvey came in the door, everybody stood up in one accord and said, "Speak, Garvey, speak." And it was just like a hush on the room.
He said that the pen is mightier than the sword, but the tongue is mightier than them both put together.
Before addressing the crowd, Garvey would inhale through a perfumed handkerchief to focus his concentration. The man who once shook like a leaf on stage could now hold an audience spellbound.
When he spoke, it was as if you were speaking yourself. It was not like somebody speaking to you, but like he was you, or you was he. And it just was a connecting link, and it was something like fire, like lightning, like something that went through everybody at the same time.
Be as proud of your race today as our fathers were in the days of yore. We have a beautiful history, and we shall create another in the future that will astonish the world. I can advise no better step toward racial salvation than organization among us. We have been harassed, trampled upon, and made little of because of our unfortunate condition of disorganization. Our racial program of today is a united, emancipated, and improved people.
Garvey took black folk who were assaulted by a variety of very unfortunate and negative images of themselves and made them believe in themselves, made them see physical beauty in themselves, made them see the need to interpret and write their own history. In that sense, Garvey sold the Negro to himself.
And that's what I was kind of describing earlier. I don't know if this has a name, like he's the father. I know somebody put that he's the father of Pan-Africanism, but like also, and I guess this is part of Pan-Africanism, just believing, yourself, your self-worth, you're equal, that sort of thing that it seems so normal now, or was so normal even during civil rights, Black Panther movement kind of popularized it. But Marcus Garvey is one of the first that sort of publicly spoke in this manner about it. So tribute to him. Meant to mute.
With 35 cents, a photograph, and a pledge to support Garvey's nation-building program, any person of African descent could join the Universal Negro Improvement Association.
I saw the light, I saw the light, Moses, I saw the light, I saw the light.
Garvey's genius was to transform cooks, maids, and workmen with the pride that comes with a title and a uniform. Always think yourself a perfect being, he wrote, and be satisfied with yourself.
You would almost see them metamorph into something else. You would see it. They'd suddenly get very tall. Because the smallest man in the uniform still looked like a giant. I can tell you that from experience. They were gorgeous. The black men were gorgeous.
Jacob Samuel Mills, a master carpenter from St. Kitts, had come to Harlem in 1910. But barred from the all-white carpenters union, he could only find work as a janitor.
My father joined the Garvey movement because he thought it was something for the advancement of black people. And every Sunday afternoon when he was through with his work, he would put his uniform on. He felt very proud when he wore that uniform. He would wear it on the trolley car and let everybody look at him and talk if they wanted to talk. But that was Captain Mills.
The effect of the uniform on everyone who saw it was electrifying, but especially on white people. I heard white women fainted. When we had the big parades going down Fifth Avenue, they would just fall out.
The UNIA had something for everyone. For men, there was the African Legion. For young people, the Juvenile Division. And in the Black Cross Nurses and the Universal Motor Corps, the Garvey movement offered black women a place of their own.
We wore this uniform everywhere. That was a physical statement that these uniforms and plumage made to the rest of the world, that we are Garveyites and proud of it.
My father at one point said that the organization would have been able to develop farther and faster if we had more women in the organization in comparison to some of the wimpy men that we had.
He thought that we should have more women because the men seem to be wimpy, and I love to see. So this is just more. I'm just piggybacking off of what I already said. He's instilling the sense of pride back into some black people that might have been, torn down, broken down by Jim Crow, by Reconstruction, by all of those things that was happening.
Some of the wimpy men that we had.
And this is what I was trying to get to, was this part here. So as you can see, there were also women a part of this organization. So it's good to see.
With its elaborate rituals and official songs, Garvey's UNIA was a separate world. Members pledged allegiance to the red, black, and green flag, which Garvey himself designed as a symbol of a black nation in the making.
Show me the race or the nation without a flag, and I will show you a race of people without any pride. But that was said of us 4 years ago. They can't say it now.
Ethiopia, the land of our fathers, thou land where the gods love to be, as storm clouds suddenly gather, all armies come rushing to thee. And then the chorus went something like that. Advance, advance to meet the foe, let Africa be free. That's women would sing that, and men would reply, advance, women, advance to victory. Men, advance, advance to meet the foe, advance. And everybody, with the might of the red, the black, and the green, advance. With the might of the red, the black, and the green.
Oops. I think that's a good place to stop for the first part of Marcus Garvey, the early years. I was looking and looking and looking, and I finally found this in my DM. And I think I did this probably 10 months ago. So I had to scroll through a lot in my one of my messages to find this this speech. I've used it as an intro. I haven't done it in a long time though, but now I will. And we can hear him speak here listen to how powerful he speaks in this one. For those that have never heard him speak, this would be a treat for you to kind of hear. It's only 1 minute long.
Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. They gave leadership to our foreparents, and that leadership made them slaves. But we have decided to find a leadership of our own to make ourselves free men. Our great scholars have inspired through the colleges, the universities, have thrown away the blessed record. Babylon did it. Assyria did it. France under Napoleon did it. Germany under Prince von Bismarck did it. England under America under George Washington did it. Africa with 400 million black people can do it. If you cannot do it, if you are not prepared to do it, then you will die. You race of cowards, you race of imbeciles, you race of good for nothing. If you cannot do what other men have done, what other nations have done, what other races have done, then you have better die.
Oh, wow. Wow, I thought that's yeah. I may have to listen to that again or either use it as an outro because that was. Let me listen to that again. Let's listen to that again.
Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. They gave leadership to our foreparents, and that leadership made them slaves. But we have decided to find a leadership of our own to make ourselves free men. Our great scholars have inspired through the colleges, the universities, have thrown away the blessed record. Babylon did it. Assyria did it. France under Napoleon did it. Germany under Prince von Bismarck did it. England under America under George Washington did it. Africa with 400 million black people can do it. If you cannot do it, if you are not prepared to do it, then you will die. You race of cowards, you race of imbeciles, you race of good for nothing. If you cannot do what other men have done, what other nations have done, what other races have done, then you have better die.
Woo! Yeah, that's very very fiery coming from Marcus Garvey. I retweeted that for those that are on Twitter. I didn't know any other way to get this. I mean, not that it's a problem. I retweeted, but I didn't know how any other way to get this so I can play it for you. So let me bring up this video, the intro. I'm gonna also leave us with this video to close out this first part, the early years of Marcus Garvey. We're going to do at least another part, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be 3 parts because it's an hour and a half and we just did 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to keep it around 30 minutes with commentary and playing 30 minutes of the documentary. That, yeah, it'll probably end up to about an hour. So where we're at now, about an hour and approaching 10 minutes. So thank you for those that watched and dropped in, and thank you for those. Make sure you come back for the part 2. Don't know when we're going to do it. Also, make sure you hit that like button on your way out so that those that watch it on replay can easily find it. With enough likes, it'll pop up. And most people, not most, in a good number of people feeds, we're still being suppressed. So I'm not going to say most. So give it a like on your way out. And don't forget, join our, join our Substack. It's scrolling at the, is it scrolling at the bottom too? But join our Substack for notifications when we do things. So you know when I'm going to do a part 2 and a part 3 and do the Ernesto Che Guevara or Muhammad Ali, I Am the Revolution. So stay tuned for that. I still got to do Edward Bernays, who is the father of American or the United States propaganda, who happens to be the nephew of Sigmund Freud. So there's psychology behind it, and I need to do that one also. So if you enjoyed this, make sure you give it a like. Also share. These are the content that isn't the eye candy that brings all the eyes. So this one you have to share to get people to view it. So make sure you do that. Is there anything I'm missing here? I'll pop up. I put these up, but I can put them up again on the way out. And that's where we got the father of Pan-Africans. And then this one, I put these up again, but I'm going to just read them. I put these up before, but I'll put them up again to read them. How do you feel about these frauds? Let me see. Why is this big? Who gleefully denied their African ancestry, claim that Black folks are actually Aboriginal to United States, the U.S. mainly, and even derive legit Native Americans as being Mongolian invaders. I don't have an opinion because most of that I don't even know what you're talking about. So I don't know enough to have an opinion. Urgent news. Support RBN via recurring donations. Engage on this mainstream billionaire app, and obviously tell all of your friends. I think that was all of the super chats that I saw. If I missed yours, it was not intentional. Just switching back and forth, producing on my own. Sometimes that happens, but thank you to everybody that watch, and make sure you come back for part 2. If you get on our Substack, you will be notified and know when that is. We'll end the way we begin with this short clip of Marcus Garvey and when he got shot and how the FBI came after him.
A man named George Tyler, who put a lot of money into Garvey's hand. He was a former investor. One day, he came to see Garvey at one of the UNIA offices. George Tyler stepped in and started shooting. So as he's in there bussing, Amy Ashwood, who was only Garvey's girlfriend at the time before he married her, jumped in front of the shooter to protect Garvey and tackled him down a flight of stairs. Garvey was hit 3 times. The next day, Garvey still went to his lecture and spoke in Philadelphia, all bandaged up and everything. The UNIA was growing at an alarming rate, and the Back to Africa movement was huge. Garvey was big time. There were over 500 chapters of the UNIA. And now here comes J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover sent all types of agents to infiltrate the UNIA.
Hoover's agents were in the audience at Carnegie Hall when Garvey bragged that the UNIA would soon be strong enough to exact its own form of justice.
When those crackers lynch a Negro below the Mason-Dixon line, since it is not safe to lynch a white man in any part of America, we shall press the button and lynch him in Africa.
The agent reported that Garvey's address was met with great applause and much excitement.
Garvey felt like Black folks needed their own ships. There was the White Star Line, the Irish had the Green Star Line, so Garvey created the Black Star Line. Not only just to help with transportation, but to also sell goods. The SS Yarmouth was the first ship purchased, and Garvey renamed the ship the Frederick Douglass.
Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. They gave leadership to our foreparents, and that leadership made them slaves. But we have decided to find a leadership of our own to make ourselves free men.
Our great scholars have advanced through the colleges and universities have thrown away the blessed record. Babylon did it. Assyria did it. France under Napoleon did it. Germany under Prince von Bismarck did it. England under America under George Washington did it. Africa with 400 million black people can do it. If you cannot do it, if you are not prepared to do it, then you will die. You race of cowards, you race of imbeciles, you race of good for nothing. If you cannot do what other men have done, what other nations have done, what other races have done, then you have better die.